Olivia Carter's heels clicked sharply against the tarmac, her sleek Gulfstream jet gleaming under the morning sun. But before she could take another step, a crisp voice sliced through the air. "Ma'am, this area is restricted. VIP passengers only." Samantha Briggs, the flight attendant with a face set in stone, blocked her path with a look that could freeze steel. All eyes turned, whispers rippling through the crowd. Olivia's boarding pass and ID hung useless in her hand. The humiliation burned. She said nothing, just reached for her phone. One quiet call, and the world around Samantha was about to collapse. The hum of private jets on the far end of Atlanta's international terminal was a familiar comfort to Olivia Sinclair. At 17, she wasn't the kind of teenager most people expected to find walking toward a chartered Gulfstream. Dressed in the navy and gold uniform of Wellington Academy, one of the nation's most prestigious prep schools, she looked every inch the daughter of someone important. But Olivia never flaunted that. Today was about efficiency. Boarding the Sinclair family jet for a short flight to New York to begin a series of college interviews that could define her future. Her sister Maya walked just behind her, matching her steady pace. They'd planned everything down to the minute. Arrive discreetly, check into the private terminal lounge, review their prep materials, and board without fanfare. Their father's instructions had been clear. Maintain a low profile. No special treatment, no drama. Olivia's confidence faltered the moment they reached the frosted glass doors of the Orion Air VIP lounge. A tall woman in a perfectly pressed uniform stepped into their path, her lips pursed in disapproval. The badge on her lapel read Samantha Clark, VIP Services Supervisor. "Ma'am," Samantha began, her voice laced with authority and just enough contempt to be unmistakable. "The VIP lounge is for passengers, not staff." The words landed like a slap, sharp and public. A few other travelers within earshot glanced up from their phones. Some smirked, assuming Samantha was shooing away someone who didn't belong. Olivia blinked, stunned. "I am a passenger," she said evenly, producing her boarding documents for the Sinclair jet. Samantha didn't even glance at the documents. Her eyes swept Olivia's uniform, then Maya's. "Cute story," she said with a tight smile. "But this area is for paying clients. The staff entrance is around the back." Maya stepped forward, her voice controlled but edged with disbelief. "We're not staff. We have confirmed reservations." Samantha's gaze hardened, her voice lowering but carrying just enough to be overheard by the seated audience nearby. "Young lady, if you insist on disrupting operations, I'll have to call security. We cannot have every person in a school blazer claiming VIP status." From the corner, a young Orion Air concierge, no more than 25, froze mid-task. His eyes widened in recognition. Olivia Sinclair. He'd seen her name on internal rosters before, always tagged with a discreet notation that made most employees tread carefully. He took a tentative step forward. "Ms. Sinclair, he began. But Samantha's sharp voice cut him off instantly. "Ethan, back to your station," she snapped, the steel in her tone brooking no argument. "We do not make exceptions for every walk-in who thinks they're important." Ethan hesitated, then glanced between Olivia and Samantha, clearly torn. His lips pressed into a thin line before he stepped back, cowed by the older woman's authority. Olivia's cheeks burned, not from shame, but from the controlled anger simmering beneath her calm exterior. Her father had warned her about moments like this. Never give them the satisfaction of seeing you lose control. Around them, the lounge guests returned to their conversations, some with knowing smirks, others pretending not to watch. Maya shifted uncomfortably but didn't speak. Samantha folded her arms, clearly confident she'd won. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have real VIPs to attend to." Olivia inhaled slowly, her mind cataloging every detail. The time, the place, the witnesses. She could feel her sister's frustration radiating beside her, but she simply nodded, as though Samantha's insult had landed without resistance. "Understood," Olivia said quietly. "We wouldn't want to disrupt your operations." Without another word, she turned away, motioning for Maya to follow. They walked deliberately, past the lounge windows, toward the general concourse. Maya leaned in close, her voice tight. "Liv, we can't just let her—" "Not here," Olivia murmured, eyes fixed ahead. "Not now. Let her believe she's won." Behind them, Samantha was already greeting another passenger with syrupy warmth. Her earlier hostility vanished like a switch had been flipped. Olivia noted the transformation, filing it away. As they reached the quieter stretch of terminal, Maya finally exhaled. "That was exactly the kind of behavior Dad's been talking about," Olivia finished. Her tone was measured, but her hands were curled into tight fists at her sides. They found a small alcove near an unused gate and stopped to regroup. Maya's face was still flushed. "We could have just called him. One call and—" Olivia shook her head firmly. "No, he told us to handle this ourselves unless it's an emergency. Right now, it's just information. The more rope they give themselves, the bigger the knot they'll tie." Maya studied her sister for a moment, recognizing that deliberate calm that always preceded something bigger. "You're thinking 3 steps ahead again," Maya said. "Always," Olivia replied. She reached into her bag, checking the boarding documents again, every detail correct. Then her gaze drifted back toward the VIP lounge in the distance. Samantha Clark's voice still echoed in her mind. "VIP lounge is for passengers, not staff." A flicker of a smile touched Olivia's lips, not from amusement, but from certainty. Samantha had just written herself into a story she didn't understand, and one she wasn't going to like the ending of. Olivia Sinclair reappeared 20 minutes later, not through the staff corridor Samantha had so smugly suggested, but walking the length of the concourse in full view of the lounge entrance. Her navy blazer caught the overhead light, the gold Wellington Academy crest polished to a gleam. A tailored ivory blouse, slim-cut trousers, and low-heeled shoes gave her the look of someone older than her 17 years. She carried no designer bag to flash her status, just a compact leather folio under one arm, the kind corporate interns used, understated but professional. The kind of girl, Samantha thought sourly, who desperately wants to look important. Samantha's voice was sugar-dipped in venom as Olivia approached. "Back again, Miss Sinclair," Olivia replied smoothly, her tone neutral but firm. She held out her boarding packet without hesitation. "Documentation for Flight Sinclair 1, departing in 40 minutes." Samantha took the documents with a languid, exaggerated care, flipping each page as though she were examining a suspect passport. "I'll need to verify all of this," Samantha said, her voice pitched just loud enough to be overheard by a pair of businessmen lounging nearby. "These things take time, you understand. There are protocols." Behind her, Maya kept her expression deliberately neutral. She'd seen this play before. Draw it out, delay them, make them squirm. But Olivia remained motionless, her hand folded lightly in front of her, her expression unreadable. A pair of VIPs approached the counter from the opposite direction. A man in his late 60s, immaculately dressed, with a silver-headed cane that spoke more to style than necessity. His eyes fell on Olivia and immediately brightened. "Ah, there you are," he exclaimed, striding toward her. "I was wondering when you'd arrive." Olivia blinked in polite confusion. "I'm sorry?" "My assistant," the man explained with a warm chuckle. "I assumed Orion Air had sent you down to escort me to my flight. I must say, you have exactly the look I told them to arrange. Smart, capable, discreet." The remark landed like a flare in the room. The two businessmen exchanged amused glances. Samantha's eyes glittered with satisfaction. "Oh, she does have that look, doesn't she?" Samantha said, smiling broadly at the man. "Very professional, though." Her gaze slid back to Olivia. "She's not with our staff. Not officially, anyway." Olivia's pulse quickened, but her face remained perfectly composed. She inclined her head slightly toward the older gentleman. "I'm flattered by the compliment, sir, but I'm traveling as a passenger today." The man looked mildly embarrassed, fumbling for an apology. "Ah, my mistake entirely. I just assumed—" "No harm done," Olivia said lightly. stepping back just enough to end the exchange without prolonging his discomfort. But the damage was already done. To casual observers, the implication had been clear. The elegant young woman had been mistaken for staff, reinforcing Samantha's earlier narrative that she didn't belong in the VIP space. Samantha slid Olivia's documents back across the counter with theatrical slowness. "Everything appears in order," she said, emphasizing the word as though it were a personal concession. "I suppose we can allow you to wait in the lounge until your boarding time." Her tone suggested she was granting an undeserved favor. Olivia accepted the packet with a calm nod. "I appreciate your thoroughness." Maya bit back a smile. She knew her sister's vocabulary well enough to hear the razor behind the civility. They stepped past the counter into the lounge proper. Plush leather chairs, discreetly placed charging stations, and a low murmur of conversation created a quiet bubble apart from the bustle of the terminal. Samantha watched them go, her expression triumphant. She'd managed to publicly undermine Olivia twice in under an hour, with witnesses for both moments. But Olivia wasn't interested in Samantha's scoreboard. She was interested in the scoreboard that mattered, the one Samantha didn't even know existed. Maya leaned close as they settled into a pair of armchairs in the far corner. "You handled that like a pro. I would have lost it at the assistant comment." Olivia smiled faintly. Why give her the satisfaction? Every time she thinks she scored a point, she gets more careless. People show their true selves when they think they're winning. Maya tilted her head, considering that. "So, we let her keep thinking she's winning?" "For now," Olivia confirmed. She reached for a bottle of water from the side table, her movements unhurried. "Dad told us not to call unless it was an emergency, and this isn't that. Not yet. But..." Her gaze drifted back toward the counter where Samantha was fussing over another passenger's paperwork. "She's making a very good case for what counts as an emergency." Across the lounge, the older gentleman who had mistaken Olivia for his assistant caught her eye briefly. He raised his glass in a small apologetic toast. Olivia inclined her head graciously, then returned her attention to Maya. "We stay calm," she said. "We observe. And when the time comes..." Maya finished the thought, a slow smile spreading across her face. "We let her find out exactly who she's been talking to." Olivia didn't respond, but the look in her eyes was answer enough. The atmosphere inside the Orion Air VIP lounge shifted like a sudden draft of cold air. Samantha's voice, sharp and deliberate, cut through the low hum of conversation. "Security to Lounge 1, she said crisply into her radio, her eyes fixed on Olivia and Maya, as though she were finally swatting away a persistent annoyance. A murmur rippled through the room. Guests glanced over their champagne glasses, sensing drama. The pair of businessmen who'd overheard Samantha earlier now leaned subtly closer, hoping to catch the unfolding spectacle. Maya straightened in her seat, eyes flashing. "You've got to be kidding me." Olivia didn't rise to the bait. She closed the leather folio she'd been calmly reviewing, set it on the side table, and stood. Her posture was measured, unhurried, as if this was simply another delay in a long day of travel. "Ladies," Samantha said in a falsely polite tone as two uniformed security officers stepped into the lounge. "These guests are not authorized for this area. Please escort them to the public terminal." One of the officers, a younger man with a wary glance, looked between Samantha and Olivia. "Ma'am, can I see your documents?" "They've been checked," Samantha interjected before Olivia could respond. "And they're not valid for this lounge. We've been more than patient." Olivia turned her head slightly, meeting Maya's gaze. Her sister's fists were clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. Without raising her voice, Olivia said, "Maya, gather your things." Maya opened her mouth to protest, but Olivia's subtle shake of the head silenced her. The entire lounge seemed to hold its breath as Olivia stepped forward. She didn't look at Samantha. She didn't look at the security officers. Instead, she slipped a sleek phone from her bag, scrolling briefly before lifting it to her ear. "I will make a call," she said softly. It wasn't loud, but it carried. The quiet authority in her voice drew the attention of everyone within 10 feet. Samantha gave a short, dismissive laugh. Oh, please. Calling your parents isn't going to... Olivia raised one hand lightly, not as a plea for silence, but as though she were dismissing background noise. Her eyes remained fixed ahead. Falcon Control, she said into the phone. Protocol Falcon Blue. Activate immediately. Location, ATL Orion VIP 1. The words were precise, clipped. They didn't sound like a teenager appealing for help. They sounded like an instruction being relayed to someone who understood exactly what it meant. The security officers exchanged a glance, the younger one's brow furrowing. Samantha's smirk faltered for the briefest moment before she recovered. And what exactly is Protocol Falcon Blue? Samantha asked, her tone mocking but just a shade tighter than before. Olivia ended the call without answering. She slipped the phone back into her bag, adjusted the sleeve of her blazer, and turned to Maya. We'll wait outside, she said calmly. Maya hesitated, searching her sister's face. Falcon Blue? She whispered as they stepped toward the exit. Olivia's expression didn't change. Just a note in the system, she replied, her voice so low it barely carried. They walked past the counter. Samantha stepped neatly aside, though her chin was tilted in defiance. Enjoy the public terminal, she said, her tone once again syrupy sweet for the benefit of onlookers. Outside the lounge, the hum of the main concourse felt louder, more chaotic after the insulated quiet. Maya kept her voice low. Okay, what was that? You didn't even say Dad's name. I told you, Olivia said, eyes scanning the terminal as though they were simply finding their gate. This isn't about Dad, not yet, but there are certain arrangements in place if things go wrong. Maya stared. And Protocol Falcon Blue is... Olivia allowed herself the faintest of smiles. You'll see soon enough. Inside the lounge, Samantha returned to the counter, though she found herself glancing toward the entrance more often than before. The older gentleman who had mistaken Olivia for his assistant earlier was watching her now with a mild frown, as though he was reassessing the scene he'd just witnessed. The younger security officer lingered by the counter for a moment before muttering something to his partner. His radio buzzed quietly, just static, but enough to make Samantha glance at it sharply. For the first time that day, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. In the concourse, Olivia and Maya slowed their pace near an unmarked door where an Orion Air Staff member was scanning a badge. Olivia glanced toward the door, then kept walking as if she had no interest. Liv, Maya said under her breath. You look way too calm for someone who just got thrown out of the VIP lounge. Olivia's reply was almost casual. Maya, calm is what makes people underestimate you, and when they underestimate you. She let the sentence trail off, her smile just sharp enough to promise something more. Behind them, a chime sounded faintly from the direction of the lounge. A few nearby passengers turned their heads, but no one seemed to know what it meant. Maya caught the sound and looked at Olivia. That was just the system, Olivia said lightly, but her eyes glinted. They continued toward the general terminal seating, the illusion of defeat carefully maintained. But for those who were paying close attention, the real game had just begun. The midday rush at Hartsfield-Jackson was in full swing. Travelers streamed past the central concourse, oblivious to the undercurrent building inside Orion Air's private terminal. A tall man in a charcoal suit moved with deliberate purpose through the terminal. Daniel Rhodes, senior aide to Jonathan Sinclair, wasn't accustomed to being ignored in an Orion Air facility. His badge, embossed with the discreet Falcon emblem, was a skeleton key for corporate access. But today, it got him as far as the security gate, before everything ground to a halt. Sir, I'll need you to step aside, a TSA officer said, his tone more procedural than hostile. Private terminal access is restricted due to an internal review. Daniel's jaw tightened. I'm here on company business, CEO clearance. He displayed his credentials, expecting the usual wave-through. The officer barely glanced at them. I'm going to have to confirm this. He motioned to another officer, who stepped between Daniel and the entry point. Daniel exhaled sharply. Jonathan's instructions had been clear. Minimal disruption, no use of overt authority unless absolutely necessary. But as he checked his phone, the situation in the lounge was deteriorating in real time. Inside, Samantha's confidence was snowballing. With Daniel stalled at security, her grip on the situation felt absolute. She approached Olivia and Maya, who had been seated in the general terminal seating area since their ejection from the lounge. Her smile was one of professional triumph. "Still here?" Samantha asked sweetly. "I would have thought you'd found somewhere more appropriate by now." Olivia met her gaze evenly. "We're quite comfortable here." Samantha's eyes narrowed, her voice dropping just enough for nearby passengers to hear. "You know, it's remarkable how many people think they can bend rules just by being persistent, but rules are rules." Maya shifted in her seat, her patience fraying. "Rules or excuses?" she asked, her voice low. Samantha ignored her, turning her attention back to Olivia. "You seem very calm for someone who's just been denied access. Perhaps you know something I don't." Olivia didn't respond. Her stillness was infuriating. Across the terminal, a young FAA field officer named Carla Mendoza was seated at a coffee kiosk, waiting for a delayed connection. She wasn't on duty, just killing time. But the moment her attention drifted toward the growing standoff near the Orion VIP lounge, she recognized the dynamic instantly. Carla had seen enough of these policy enforcement moments to know the pattern. A staff member digging in, passengers pushed out of spaces they had every right to be in. The slow escalation toward security intervention. She sipped her coffee, set her phone on the table, and, under the cover of casually scrolling social media, opened her camera app. The lens captured Samantha's pointed stance, Olivia's measured calm, Maya's tense posture. Carla didn't narrate, didn't editorialize. She just let the moment breathe, a silent stream broadcasting to her small circle of aviation colleagues. Back at the lounge entrance, a pair of businessmen who'd witnessed Samantha's earlier comments approached her under the pretense of checking boarding times. "You're really cracking down today," one of them remarked with a grin that wasn't entirely friendly. "Keeping the wrong people out?" Samantha's smile didn't falter. "Just doing my job. Standards have to be maintained." Olivia caught the exchange out of the corner of her eye. She didn't smile, but the faintest spark lit behind her calm expression. Every unnecessary comment Samantha made in public was another thread in the rope she was weaving for herself. Meanwhile, Daniel had stepped aside at security, his phone pressed to his ear. "Yes," he said quietly. "I'm being delayed. No need to escalate yet. Protocol Falcon Blue is active. I just need to be in place when..." He trailed off, glancing toward the security officers. "Understood. Holding position." The officer returned his credentials with a carefully neutral expression. "We're waiting for a call from the main office. Shouldn't be more than a few minutes." Daniel nodded once, outwardly patient, inwardly calculating. Every minute mattered. In the terminal seating, Maya leaned close to Olivia. "We could just leave, you know. Go to the public gate, board from there." Olivia's gaze flicked briefly toward Samantha, then back to her sister. "And let her think she won?" "No. Some things are worth seeing through." As they spoke, Carla's phone buzzed with notifications. The quiet live stream she'd started as a casual observer was being reshared among FAA staff. A colleague in Miami sent a message. "Is that Orion Air's ATL lounge? Who's the supervisor?" Carla replied with a simple, "Clark, Samantha." Within minutes, the video had been clipped, subtitled, and reposted on a larger aviation forum. It hadn't gone viral in the public sense yet, but in the tightly knit network of industry insiders, it was gaining traction. Samantha, oblivious to the online ripple, leaned in toward Olivia once more. "I hope you don't think a phone call is going to change anything. You're just making things harder for yourself." Olivia tilted her head slightly, as though considering the statement. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "things need to be a little harder before they get better." Samantha's brows drew together. "What does that even..." A chime sounded faintly from somewhere deep in the terminal. It was nothing unusual, just the overhead alert system cycling. But Olivia's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Maya caught the movement. "That's..." she began, but Olivia's subtle shake of the head stopped her. At the security gate, Daniel's phone buzzed. He checked the screen, then slipped the device back into his pocket. "Clearance confirmed," the senior officer said, stepping aside. Daniel's nod was curt. "Appreciate the cooperation." As he stepped into the private terminal, his eyes scanned for Olivia and Maya. He spotted them almost immediately, and then saw Samantha, still stationed like a sentry nearby. Carla's phone was still buzzing. A comment had just been posted on the reposted video. "Someone needs to tell Sinclair about this. He's going to lose it." Carla glanced at Olivia again, noticing the same calm she'd seen in senior executives holding their cards until the perfect moment. Olivia adjusted her blazer cuff and finally looked up at Samantha. "We'll wait here until boarding," she said simply. Samantha smirked, still believing she was in control. "Of course you will." But Maya, catching the glint in her sister's eyes, knew better. Somewhere threads were already moving. Olivia had learned early in life that silence was a weapon most people underestimated. While Samantha moved around the lounge like a queen patrolling her court, Olivia sat calmly in a corner chair, her leather folio open on her lap. Inside the folio wasn't college prep material anymore. It was a clean legal pad and a fine-tipped pen. She began writing in slow, precise lines. 12:43 p.m. Lounge supervisor Samantha Clark refuses access despite confirmed boarding documentation. Statements. VIP lounge is for passengers, not staff. Rules must be enforced. Tone. Deliberately public, aimed at humiliation. Across from her, Maya glanced at the page. "You're writing it all down?" Olivia didn't look up. "Every word, every timestamp. If they want to play by rules, we'll use rules they can't escape from." The lounge staff continued to circulate. Samantha occasionally cast sharp looks in their direction, as if trying to gauge whether Olivia was making a scene. She misread the calm. Olivia slid her phone discreetly into her palm, scrolling to a contact marked only by initials, JK. She tapped it once, the call connecting almost instantly. "This is Keller," a smooth voice answered. "Ms. Sinclair," Olivia said in the same measured tone she used at school debates. "This is a courtesy call. FAA Liaison Keller?" "Yes, ma'am." His voice sharpened. "You need me on site?" "Not yet," Olivia replied. "I'm advising you of a developing situation. Please log Protocol Falcon Blue, ATL Orion VIP-1. There was a brief pause. "Logged. Do you require legal presence?" "Standby status will suffice for now," Olivia said, her gaze still fixed on Samantha across the room. Maya leaned closer. "FAA? Liv, that's..." Olivia shook her head slightly, ending the call. "Just a note in the right file," she said. Samantha, who had been whispering with another staffer, finally returned to Olivia's table. Her smile was tight, the kind used to mask discomfort. "You're taking this very seriously for a lounge seating issue," Samantha said. Olivia met her gaze without flinching. "Documentation matters." Samantha's brows arched. "Documentation?" She let out a small laugh, turning slightly so nearby guests could hear. "Sweetheart, pretending to be powerful doesn't make it so." Maya shifted in her seat, her voice tightening. "She's not pretending." Samantha waved a dismissive hand. "Of course, and I'm the head of Orion Air Security." Her tone dripped with mockery. "Do you know who actually is the head of Orion Air Security? Because he's on his way here right now." That caught more than just Maya's attention. Several guests looked up from their laptops and newspapers. Olivia's pen paused mid-sentence on her notepad, but her expression didn't change. "Is that so?" she asked evenly. Samantha leaned in just enough for the words to be sharp but quiet. "And when he arrives, I'm sure he'll confirm exactly what I've said all along. You don't belong in that lounge. You never did." The implication was clear. Samantha wasn't just confident. She believed she had reinforcements coming. Whether or not that was true was irrelevant. The tension in the room tightened like a drawn wire. Maya's voice was low as Samantha walked away. "Liv, what if she's not bluffing? What if someone really is coming down here to back her up?" Olivia's eyes remained on the page. "Then we document their statements too." In the far corner, Carla Mendoza's phone buzzed again. Her live stream had picked up more viewers. FAA colleagues were commenting rapid fire now. "They're going to regret this. Who's the tall girl with the folio? She's playing this perfectly." One comment stood out. "If Clark thinks Sinclair is alone, she's in for a shock." Carla glanced at Olivia again. The teenager's expression was almost unnervingly calm, her hand moving steadily across the page. Back at the security gate, Daniel Rhodes had finally cleared the checkpoint. His phone vibrated as he stepped into the private terminal. A text from Jonathan. "Hold position. Do not engage until prompted." Daniel's jaw tightened. Jonathan Sinclair didn't waste words, and a message like that meant the timing of every move mattered. Inside the lounge, Samantha continued her rotation, her voice dropping every so often as she spoke to staff. Her movements weren't random. She was building her narrative with each interaction, solidifying the version of events she wanted documented. Olivia noted the pattern with a quiet precision. 1:12 p.m. Clark continues to solicit staff statements supporting denial of access, public narrative being constructed. The tension in the room had shifted. It wasn't explosive yet, but the balance of confidence was fragile. Samantha's repeated references to security arriving created a low hum of anticipation among the guests. Maya fidgeted, unable to keep still. "Liv, people are watching us. This is uncomfortable." Olivia looked up briefly, her tone calm, but her eyes focused. "Good. Let them watch." At the far end of the lounge, the sound of footsteps approached. Deliberate, unhurried, but firm enough to turn heads. Samantha's posture straightened almost automatically, her smile snapping back into place. Olivia capped her pen and closed her folio. Maya leaned in. "Is this it? Is this who she was talking about?" Olivia didn't answer. She simply adjusted her blazer cuff, her movements measured, her breathing even. The figure that appeared in the doorway wasn't security, at least not in the way Samantha had been suggesting. It was a senior Orion operations manager, his badge visible but his expression unreadable. He paused just inside the entrance, scanning the room. His eyes fell briefly on Olivia before moving to Samantha. "Supervisor Clark," he said, his tone neutral. Samantha stepped forward, confident. "Yes, I've been maintaining protocol here. We have a pair of passengers attempting to access areas they're not cleared for." The manager's gaze flicked back to Olivia, then to Samantha. "I see." Olivia remained silent. She didn't need to argue her case. Not yet. Daniel Rhodes had spent the better part of an hour maneuvering through the labyrinth of airport security protocols. By the time he finally stepped off the elevator that led down to the restricted tarmac access point, his patience had thinned. The private terminal's tarmac area stretched before him, a gleaming runway of corporate jets lined in perfect symmetry. His target, the Sinclair family Gulfstream, was parked in its usual spot. All he needed to do was cross 30 yards and get upstairs to the lounge. Except Samantha Clark was waiting. She wasn't physically blocking his way. She didn't have to. Instead, she was in conversation with two ground staff, her voice low but pitched just high enough for Daniel to catch. "Certain protocols about who can be admitted unaccompanied," she was saying, her tone rich with the kind of authority that thrives on bureaucratic delay. Daniel stepped forward. "Supervisor Clark," he greeted evenly. "I believe you've been made aware of my clearance." Samantha's smile was polite but edged. "Of course, Mr. Rhodes, but you know how it is. Documentation must be thorough. We wouldn't want to set a precedent for special treatment." Daniel's eyes narrowed fractionally. "I'm here on direct instruction from Mr. Sinclair." "Yes," Samantha said, her voice honeyed. "And Mr. Sinclair will understand that I'm protecting the integrity of Orion Air protocols. I'm sure he appreciates that." Upstairs, Olivia remained seated, Maya at her side. both aware that every passing minute was another Samantha-controlled delay. The room's energy shifted subtly each time Samantha returned from her trips to the tarmac. Confidence intact, posture sharpened. Olivia flipped open her folio again, her pen moving steadily. 1:47 p.m. Daniel Rhodes delayed at tarmac access. Clark continues to frame delay as protocol compliance in conversations with staff. The sound of new footsteps at the lounge entrance interrupted the steady murmur of the room. This time, the change in atmosphere was immediate. Thomas Blake, director of Orion Air's Eastern Operations, entered with the easy confidence of someone used to controlling a room. Tall, broad-shouldered, perfectly tailored suit. The man looked every inch the executive he was. Samantha's smile widened perceptibly as she moved to greet him. "Director Blake," she said warmly, extending her hand. "Supervisor Clark," Blake replied, shaking it firmly. "I hear you've been managing quite the situation." Samantha's glance toward Olivia was deliberate. "Just doing my job, ensuring standards are upheld." Blake turned to survey the lounge. His gaze landed on Olivia briefly, then returned to Samantha. "Good. We can't have disruptions in our VIP facilities. Optics matter." Maya's stomach sank. She leaned closer to Olivia. "He's taking her side." Olivia didn't respond immediately. Her eyes tracked Blake's movements, her mind cataloging every word. Samantha's voice carried enough for the room to hear. "It's refreshing to have support from leadership. We work hard to maintain the reputation of Orion Air's premium services." Blake nodded approvingly. "And that's exactly why we can't have exceptions being made without proper vetting." It was a perfect soundbite, short, defensible, and positioned to make Samantha look like the model of procedural discipline. Daniel finally entered the lounge just as Blake finished his statement. His eyes moved instantly to Olivia, then to Blake and Samantha. His expression tightened almost imperceptibly. This was worse than he expected. Blake greeted him with a nod. "Rhodes, I assume you're here on Sinclair's instructions?" Daniel kept his voice carefully neutral. "I am. I was delayed at tarmac security." "Understandable," Blake said smoothly. Supervisor Clark was ensuring compliance. Samantha's expression was pure satisfaction. In the corner, Carla Mendoza's live stream picked up the exchange. Comments started to stack. Blake just sided with Clark. "This is bad optics." "Does Sinclair know?" Olivia adjusted her pen, jotting down another note. 2:05 p.m. Blake arrival. Publicly aligns with Clark's interpretation. Daniel arrival acknowledged but neutralized. Maya glanced at her sister. "Liv, this doesn't look good." Olivia's voice was quiet, even. "That depends on what they think winning looks like." Blake moved toward the center of the lounge, his tone pitched for everyone present. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience during this brief procedural matter. Orion Air remains committed to ensuring all guests receive the highest standard of service." It was the kind of corporate reassurance that sounded like closure. Several guests nodded, satisfied. Samantha stepped back, her smile serene. From her perspective, the game was over, but Olivia's eyes remained steady, her notes precise. 2:08 p.m. Public narrative framed as resolved. Actual resolution pending. Blake shook Samantha's hand again before making his way toward the exit. His voice lowered as he passed Daniel. "Hold your position. Wait for Sinclair's signal." Daniel's eyes narrowed fractionally. He gave a single nod. To the casual observer, Olivia was boxed in. Samantha had executive backing, Daniel was neutralized, and the public narrative was tilting in her opponent's favor. But to those who knew how Jonathan Sinclair operated, this was just another move in a much longer game. The lounge had settled into a deceptive calm, the kind that precedes a thunderclap. Samantha Clark stood near the service bar, posture relaxed, her perfectly composed face betraying no hint of concern. Thomas Blake, satisfied that the situation had been managed, was speaking quietly with a member of the ground operations team. Olivia sat exactly where she had been, her notes still open, Maya beside her. Daniel Rhodes lingered near the entrance, silent but alert. Then he moved. "Ladies and gentlemen," Daniel began, his voice carrying just enough to cut through the ambient noise of the lounge. "For the sake of transparency, I think it's time we clarify a few things about Ms. Olivia Carter's presence here." Heads turned instantly. Samantha's smile froze ever so slightly. Daniel reached into his leather folio, removing a crisp folder. "Per directive, I'm authorized to present documentation confirming that Ms. Carter is not just a first-class passenger. She is the chairwoman of the FAA Diversity Advisory Board and the registered owner of the aircraft currently parked at Tarmac Bay 4. The words hit the room like a physical impact. For a beat, silence reigned. Then, the whispers began. "She's the chairwoman? She owns the plane? What is happening here?" Several passengers reached for their phones, cameras tilted. Carla Mendoza's live stream zoomed in as Daniel placed the documents on the nearest table for anyone to see. Thomas Blake's expression shifted from confident neutrality to sharp unease. Samantha's gaze, however, remained fixed, still smiling, still controlled. Maya exhaled sharply beside Olivia. "They know now. This changes everything." Olivia didn't move. Her voice was calm. "It changes the optics, not the players." Across the lounge, Carla's stream chat was exploding. "Chairwoman of FAA Diversity Board? She owns the plane they're blocking her from? Clark and Blake are done." Thomas Blake stepped forward, his tone now measured. "Ms. Carter, if this information is correct, then I believe we have a misalignment of internal communication. I will, of course, be reporting this immediately to HQ." Daniel's eyes didn't leave him. "You'll want to include the part where your supervisor here attempted to obstruct a Federal Advisory Board chair at your flagship lounge." Phones were out. Video was rolling. This was no longer just an internal matter. It was public, documented, and spreading in real time. And yet, Samantha Clark did not look afraid. In fact, her smile deepened ever so slightly. "That's impressive, Daniel," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "But before you get too comfortable thinking you've changed the game, there's something you don't know." The room went still again. Samantha reached into her own jacket pocket, retrieving her phone. She scrolled with deliberate slowness before pressing a contact. She put the call on speaker, her tone confident. "This is Clark. We're going to need to accelerate our timeline. The chairwoman is here in person." A voice on the other end responded, deep, assured, carrying the cadence of someone far higher than a station manager. "Understood. Maintain your position. You're fully covered." Samantha's eyes flicked to Olivia, the faintest glint of satisfaction breaking through her professional mask. "You see, Ms. Carter, in this company, visibility isn't the same as power." Gasps rippled through the lounge. Passengers who had been certain the unmasking would end the confrontation now felt a sharp twist in the narrative. Carla's stream chat exploded again. "Wait, what? Who is she calling?" "She's not scared at all." Thomas Blake's brow furrowed deeply now. He looked at Samantha as if seeing her for the first time. Daniel's posture stiffened. The element of surprise was gone. Olivia finally closed her notebook. She rose slowly, her voice calm, carrying just enough to be heard over the tense silence. "Supervisor Clark, what you've just demonstrated is very valuable." Samantha tilted her head. "Oh? And what's that?" "That this is no longer a procedural issue," Olivia replied evenly. "This is structural, which means when this goes to the FAA, and it will, your little call won't save you. It will identify you." For the first time, the edges of Samantha's smile tightened, but she didn't break. The tension in the room was a live wire. Passengers recorded every word. Blake shifted uneasily, caught between protecting his chain of command and distancing himself from what was rapidly becoming a reputational nightmare. Daniel's hand hovered just over his phone, ready to escalate. And in the center of it all, Samantha Clark stood, unflinching, connected to someone high enough that even the revelation of Olivia's true role hadn't made her retreat. The crowd could feel it. This wasn't over, it was just beginning. The lounge had become a theater of tension, with every passenger a rapt audience and every phone a rolling camera. Samantha Clark's calm defiance still hung in the air, but the atmosphere shifted abruptly as Olivia stood, her FAA credentials now fully recognized and documented by multiple witnesses. "Supervisor Clark?" Olivia's voice cut cleanly through the murmurs. "Effective immediately. You are relieved of all operational duties under FAA authority. You are suspended pending investigation into misconduct and obstruction of a federal board member." Gasps swept the room. Samantha's posture remained upright, but her eyes sharpened into narrow slits. Olivia's words were more than just disciplinary action, they were a public declaration. And in the age of live streams and instant virality, that declaration was already halfway around the world. Across the lounge, Thomas Blake's phone buzzed. He shifted slightly away from the crowd, thumbing out a message with the precision of someone accustomed to playing 2 games at once. "To Orion Legal Counsel, subject, urgent. Need immediate review of FAA chair suspension call. Potential corporate overreach. Hold any permanent action pending executive review. Advise delay in execution." His eyes flicked toward Samantha, just long enough to signal what he was doing wasn't entirely in defense of procedure. It was strategic positioning. If Clark came back into power, he wouldn't be on her enemies list. Daniel Rhodes stepped forward, subtly intercepting the physical space between Olivia and Samantha. "Security, please escort Supervisor Clark off the premises." 2 uniformed officers moved in. Their presence was quiet but firm, positioning themselves on either side of Samantha. For the first time, the edges of Samantha's professionalism cracked. Not into fear, but into a sharpened performance. She looked directly at Olivia. Her voice raised so every recording device in the lounge could catch it. "You can pull me off this flight. You can walk me out that door. But I will be back. And when I am Chairwoman Carter, you'll wish this was the worst thing you had to deal with." Her voice dripped with both venom and certainty. Passengers leaned forward in their seats. Some smirked in open satisfaction, finally seeing the arrogant supervisor escorted out. Others recorded with renewed intensity, sensing the drama was far from over. Carla Mendoza's livestream comment section exploded. "Yes, she's suspended. OMG, she's threatening her on the way out? This is not over. She's got backup somewhere." Samantha's voice carried as the officers guided her toward the door. "I'll see you again, Olivia Carter. Sooner than you think." The door closed behind her with a sharp click. For a moment, the lounge exhaled. A wave of satisfaction rolled through the room. The woman who had instigated the chaos at Gate C-17 had been publicly stripped of authority and walked out. Olivia's presence remained steady, her voice calm as she addressed the room. "Thank you for your patience. Orion Air and the FAA will ensure all necessary investigations proceed according to regulation. You will all be informed as appropriate." The professionalism in her tone was like steel under velvet. But in the quiet corner of the lounge, Thomas Blake's phone buzzed again. From Orion Legal Counsel received. Executing procedural delay. Suspension logged as pending review to avoid legal escalation. Will update once Sinclair weighs in. Blake slipped the phone back into his jacket, his expression neutral. He had bought Samantha time. Not much, but enough for her to leverage whatever support from above she had hinted at earlier. Maya leaned closer to Olivia. "She's gone, but it feels like she's not really gone." Olivia's eyes were sharp. "Because she isn't. Not yet. People like Samantha don't make threats unless they're confident they can follow through." Daniel, standing nearby, kept his voice low. "We'll keep her grounded for now, but Thomas is already moving to stall. My advice? Expect her to reappear when it's most inconvenient." Olivia nodded once, her expression unreadable. The lounge was buzzing with conversation again. Passengers were trading theories, checking social media updates. Carla's stream viewership spiked as clips of Samantha's exit went viral. The dominant narrative was clear. Supervisor Clark suspended by FAA chair. threatens to return. The satisfaction was palpable. Viewers were eating up the drama, reveling in the rare moment where someone in authority was held publicly accountable. But underneath that satisfaction, an undercurrent of tension hummed. Samantha's parting words had landed exactly as intended, not as a bluff, but as a promise. And promises like that had a way of coming due. The suspension of Samantha Clark should have ended the incident. Instead, it detonated the next stage of the conflict. Within 24 hours, the FAA announced it was opening a formal investigation into Atlantic Charter, the Orion Air Division responsible for premium flight operations. The language was clinical, but the implication was serious. Potential patterns of discrimination, procedural abuse, and retaliatory behavior were now subject to federal review. Olivia Carter, as chair of the FAA Diversity Advisory Board, was the public face of the agency's oversight. For a brief moment, her position seemed unassailable, and then Samantha Clark reappeared. It began as a late-morning segment on a national talk show. Samantha was seated in a crisp civilian suit, hair styled, posture composed. The chyron beneath her name read, "Former Orion Air Supervisor speaks out. Claims suspension was personal vendetta." The host leaned forward. "Ms. Clark, can you tell us what happened at JFK that day from your perspective?" Samantha's voice was calm, measured. "I was simply doing my job. There are protocols to ensure the safety and comfort of all passengers." Chairwoman Carter, who is also married to Orion's CEO, used her position to override standard procedure in a way that, frankly, felt personal. The host's eyebrows rose. "You're suggesting this was retaliation?" "I'm saying," Samantha replied smoothly, "that when personal relationships intersect with federal oversight, there's a conflict of interest worth examining. And my suspension? It was handled in public in a way designed to humiliate me." Clips from Gate C-17 played in the background, carefully edited. The sound of her suspension was intact, but the lead-up, the part showing her obstruction, was conspicuously absent. The interview went viral almost immediately. A new hashtag appeared, #CarterConflict. Olivia watched from her office at the FAA headquarters, her face unreadable. She had expected Samantha to maneuver, but this was faster, cleaner, and more coordinated than she'd anticipated. Her phone buzzed. A secure message from Daniel Rhodes. "Thomas is feeding her media contacts. This is orchestrated. Watch for pressure on the board." Across town, in a quiet office with the blinds drawn, Thomas Blake was on a call with a media consultant. "Yes, keep pushing the personal angle," he said. His tone clipped. "The goal isn't to destroy her credibility completely, just enough to stall any FAA action until we can reorganize internally. The more doubt we create, the better." He ended the call, leaning back in his chair. In his mind, this wasn't about loyalty to Samantha. It was about leverage. If Olivia's authority could be questioned publicly, Thomas could position himself as the necessary stabilizing force inside the company. Within 48 hours, the narrative had shifted. Cable news networks ran split-screen debates. Was the FAA overreaching at JFK? Did Olivia Carter's personal relationship with Orion's CEO compromise her neutrality? Social media mirrored the frenzy. Ryan Cole's original videos still circulated, but now they competed with Samantha's curated version of events. Carla Mendoza's stream chat was divided. Samantha's lying through her teeth. But why was it all so public? Could Olivia have handled it differently? This is getting messy fast. Inside the FAA, Olivia convened a private call with her legal counsel. "We anticipated internal resistance," she said evenly. "But Thomas is leveraging media at a scale that could impact regulatory authority. I want full tracking on every outlet carrying Samantha's statements." Rachel Monroe's voice came through the speaker. "We're monitoring. Most of the push is coming from consultancy firms with indirect ties to Atlantic Charter's board. It's a coordinated campaign." Olivia's tone hardened. "Then it's a board-level play, and that means they're willing to escalate beyond optics." Back in the public sphere, Samantha wasn't slowing down. She appeared on another show 2 days later, now joined by an aviation ethics expert who conveniently reinforced her narrative. The issue here, the expert said, isn't just one supervisor. It's about the balance of power. If regulatory chairs are also directly tied to corporate leadership, the potential for misuse is obvious. Samantha nodded gravely, playing her role to perfection. By the end of the week, FAA investigators were facing a new challenge. Every step Olivia took was being scrutinized for bias. Anonymous complaints began arriving at FAA offices, some legitimate, many clearly scripted. The Carter conflict hashtag was trending in multiple markets. Inside her office, Olivia reviewed the data. Maya leaned against the doorframe. "They're going after you hard. This isn't just Samantha anymore. This is Thomas." Olivia closed the file she was reading. "Good. That means they're showing their hand, and the more they push, the more they leave a trail." Maya frowned. "You sound almost calm." Olivia's eyes were steady, because this was never just about JFK. It's about who controls the system, and they just confirmed they're afraid of losing it. For the public, it looked like Olivia Carter was under siege. Samantha Clark was no longer a sideline supervisor. She was a whistleblower in the media's eyes. Thomas Blake remained in the shadows, feeding the machine. The audience was hooked, shocked, and suddenly very aware that the FA chair might not be untouchable after all. For nearly a week, the media storm swirled relentlessly around Olivia Carter. Samantha Clark's calculated interviews had done their work. Public opinion had shifted just enough to cast a shadow of doubt. The hashtag Carter conflict was still trending, but the energy had begun to fracture. Olivia knew that when narratives are built on edited clips and half-truths, they're only as strong as the next piece of evidence. And that evidence arrived, unexpectedly, and with devastating precision. Early Monday morning, an account on a major video platform uploaded a file titled simply, Gate C-17, Full Uncut Live Stream, Original Source. It was Ryan Cole's footage, the entire footage. The unbroken stream from the moment Alyssa Carter arrived at the gate to Samantha Clark's suspension played in real time. No jump cuts, no edits, no commentary, just raw, unfiltered evidence. Viewers saw everything. They saw Samantha's deliberate obstruction. They saw Michael Grant's stalling tactics. They heard every policy misrepresentation and every thinly veiled threat. And they saw Olivia's suspension of Samantha for exactly what it was: lawful, proportionate, and professional. The reaction was immediate. On social media, the tone shifted almost overnight. "Full video is out. Samantha was lying in every interview. Olivia Carter was measured the entire time. The bias was from the crew. This changes everything." The hashtag #Justice for Olivia began trending, replacing #Carter conflict in several markets. News outlets scrambled to update their coverage. Several quietly removed previous opinion pieces that had speculated about bias. Others ran the full clip in prime time, letting the public watch and decide for themselves. And then came the second blow. A coalition of former Atlantic Charter employees, some still in the aviation industry, others long since moved on, released a joint statement to multiple media outlets. Attached was a 47-page dossier. The dossier detailed Samantha Clark's repeated history of discriminatory behavior, complete with internal complaint logs, corroborating statements, and even recorded audio from staff meetings. Phrases like, "doesn't fit our first-class image," and "reposition economy demographics" were quoted verbatim. The evidence wasn't just damning, it was systemic. Cable news anchors changed their tone overnight. One commentator summed it up. The FAA investigation into Atlantic Charter isn't just about one incident at JFK anymore. It's about a documented pattern of behavior that aligns exactly with what we saw in that full video. Samantha Clark's credibility is gone, and the coordinated media campaign against Olivia Carter? That just backfired spectacularly. In online spaces, the shift was even more dramatic. Ryan Cole's original live stream views skyrocketed. Carla Mendoza's analysis streams dissected the dossier in real time, pointing out each instance where Samantha's public statements conflicted with documented history. Comments flooded in. I knew she was lying. The full video shows everything. Olivia played this perfectly, stayed calm, let the truth surface. Now I want to know who was backing Samantha. At FAA headquarters, Olivia reviewed the public sentiment reports with Rachel Monroe. Rachel's tone was crisp. The tide has turned. Public opinion is now firmly in your corner. But the dossier introduces a new angle. Multiple former employees allege that complaints about Samantha were buried at the executive level. That points us back to Thomas Blake. Olivia closed the file, her expression steady. Good. It's time to stop playing defense. Inside Atlantic Charter, Thomas Blake felt the shift like a sudden drop in cabin pressure. His phone lit up with alerts. Headlines about Samantha's misconduct. Investors quietly expressing concern. Corporate PR now distancing itself from her entirely. The plan to discredit Olivia had collapsed. Worse, it had drawn more attention to the very pattern she was investigating. Still, Thomas wasn't finished. He never played all his cards at once. Back in the public sphere, the release of the full video and the employee dossier became the dominant story. The same talk show hosts who had platformed Samantha were now asking pointed questions. Why did Atlantic Charter allow someone with this history to remain in a supervisory role? Who authorized the coordinated PR push against the FAA chair? The questions hung in the air, unanswered. For the first time in days, Olivia allowed herself the faintest smile. In public, she remained composed, careful not to gloat. But in private, she acknowledged what everyone watching could feel. The narrative had shifted. The public was no longer doubting her. They were standing with her. And now, for the first time since Gate C-17, the momentum was fully on her side. The storm had burned for weeks, but now the air was different. The scandal at Gate C-17 had triggered investigations far beyond a single flight, a single supervisor, or even a single airline. Inside FAA headquarters, Olivia Carter stood at the podium of the main press room. Cameras from every major network pointed toward her. The energy in the room was electric. Everyone knew this was more than a press briefing. This was the moment the rules would change. Today, Olivia began, her voice steady. The FAA is implementing a mandatory reform initiative across all U.S. commercial carriers. Effective immediately, the Carter Protocol will become federal policy. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. The Carter Protocol, she continued, is a comprehensive framework to address systemic discrimination within airline operations. It mandates bias recognition training for all employees, frontline and corporate, quarterly compliance audits, and a new whistleblower protection program to ensure that no employee or passenger faces retaliation for reporting misconduct. She paused, letting the cameras and the weight of the announcement sink in. This is not optional. Airlines that fail to comply will face penalties, including suspension of operating licenses. The news hit like a shockwave. Social media exploded. Carter Protocol is here. Mandatory anti-discrimination training for all airlines. Olivia just changed the whole industry. At Orion Air's headquarters, corporate leadership scrambled to draft statements of compliance. Other carriers released preemptive announcements declaring their full support, each trying to present themselves as already aligned with the new standards. But behind the scenes, another story was unfolding. The employee dossier that had exposed Samantha Clark's misconduct had also contained buried threads that investigators were now pulling, and those threads led directly to Thomas Blake. Internal records showed a pattern of complaints repeatedly buried or dismissed during his tenure. Anonymous testimonies described his habit of protecting high-performing managers, regardless of misconduct, so long as they kept his division's numbers strong. What had once been corporate loyalty now looked like willful negligence. The FAA's investigation team moved fast. By the end of the week, Thomas Blake was summoned to an emergency board meeting at Atlantic Charter. Witnesses described the meeting as swift and surgical. Evidence was presented. Buried complaints, PR coordination to discredit Olivia, and communications linking him to Samantha Clark's post-suspension media push. When it ended, the verdict was clear. Thomas Blake was removed from his position effective immediately. The news broke within hours. Olivia read the alert on her phone as she stepped out of another meeting. She wasn't surprised. Rachel Monroe called moments later. "Thomas is out. Public statement says it's for failure to uphold company compliance standards." "But you and I both know it's bigger than that." Olivia's voice was calm. "It means the message is getting through. This isn't just about replacing people. It's about dismantling the systems that protected them." In the public sphere, the reaction was swift and decisive. Thomas Blake fired for covering up discrimination. Carter Protocol + leadership changes equals actual reform. Justice. Finally, passengers who had followed the Gate C-17 saga from the start felt a rare sense of closure. The removal of Blake was more than corporate politics. It was proof that the problem wasn't just at the gate, but in the executive offices. At Orion Air's internal training center, preparations began for the first Carter Protocol sessions. Videos, case studies, and scenario-based exercises were being finalized. Footage from Gate C-17, the full uncut version, would be part of the core curriculum. Every employee, from first-year gate agents to senior executives, would sit through the same training, and every one of them would hear Olivia's closing statement from the press conference. Discrimination isn't just wrong. It's bad business. And in this industry, bad business won't fly. For the first time in weeks, Olivia felt the weight of progress. The work was far from over. The Carter Protocol was only the beginning, but the foundation had been laid. Justice hadn't just been done at the surface. It had been written into the system. A year changes everything, and nothing. 12 months after the chaos of Gate C-17, JFK Airport looked the same on the surface. The announcements still echoed overhead, luggage still rolled noisily over polished floors, and travelers still rushed toward gates with boarding passes clutched like passports to freedom. But beneath the familiar hum, the industry itself had changed. The Carter Protocol was no longer new. It was an embedded part of airline culture. Every boarding agent, every flight attendant, every executive had completed the mandatory training. Compliance reports were public, quarterly audits were in place, and passenger complaints were tracked with a level of transparency unthinkable before. And the name Carter had become synonymous with reform. Olivia Carter stepped off the escalator into the familiar terminal. It had been almost exactly a year since she'd stood here as the center of a scandal that threatened both her professional credibility and her personal life. This time, there were no cameras, no live streams, no gate supervisors maneuvering to block her way. She wasn't here as the FAA chair today. She was here as Olivia Carter, frequent traveler, on her way to a conference in Atlanta. But she couldn't help noticing the changes as she walked. The posters on the walls now bore the Carter Protocol emblem alongside slogans like, "Respect is the standard. Every passenger, every flight." A subtle smile crossed her face. Samantha Clark's name hadn't been heard in the industry since her final media appearance imploded under the weight of the full Gate C-17 footage. Her legal challenges had gone nowhere. By the time the FAA concluded its investigation, Samantha had quietly withdrawn from aviation entirely. Officially, she had moved on to other opportunities. Unofficially, she had become a cautionary tale in every training manual. Olivia's gate was just ahead. Flight 847 to Atlanta, ironically the same flight number as the one a year earlier, was boarding first class. Standing at the door of the jet bridge was the new lead flight attendant. Her uniform was crisp, her posture confident. She greeted each passenger with a smile that was genuine, not performative. Her nameplate read, Danielle James. Olivia knew the name. Danielle had been the first recipient of the Margaret Carter Scholarship, a program created under the Carter Protocol to fund training and career development for underrepresented candidates in aviation service roles. Danielle had graduated top of her class at Orion Air's new diversity leadership program. And now she stood here, the embodiment of what reform looked like in practice. As Olivia approached, Danielle's smile widened. "Chairwoman Carter," she said warmly, recognizing her instantly. "It's an honor to have you on board. I don't think I'd even be here without what you started." Olivia shook her head lightly. "You earned this seat, Danielle. The protocol just made sure the runway was clear." Danielle's smile turned proud. "Either way, we're trained differently now. This isn't just a job, it's a standard, and we all know exactly why." She stepped aside, holding the boarding door. "Welcome aboard, ma'am." As Olivia walked down the jet bridge, she felt the same air of first class, but there was no tension coiled beneath it this time. No whispered debates about who belonged where. Her seat was ready. Her boarding pass wasn't questioned. And when the attendant offered her a drink, it was with the same courtesy extended to every passenger. She glanced toward the front of the cabin where Danielle was helping another traveler settle in. The quiet dignity of it, the normalcy, was almost more powerful than the chaos of a year ago. As the plane began to taxi, Olivia looked out the window at the runway stretching ahead. Her mind drifted back to Gate C-17, the boarding area packed with onlookers, Samantha's brittle smile, the phone calls, the threats. She thought of how far they'd come since then. The FAA's quarterly reports showed a measurable decline in discrimination complaints industry-wide. Airlines were competing not just on routes and amenities, but on compliance scores. Other transportation sectors had begun adopting elements of the Carter Protocol voluntarily, seeing its impact on customer satisfaction. Even Congress, usually gridlocked, had passed a bill codifying parts of the protocol into law for all federally regulated carriers. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Danielle passed through the cabin, checking on passengers. When she reached Olivia's seat, she paused. "Chairwoman Carter," she said, lowering her voice just slightly. "They told us in training, that moment at Gate C-17 changed everything. Not just for the passengers, but for those of us in the uniform. We feel protected now. We know where the line is, and we know we won't be left to face this alone." Olivia felt something stir in her chest. "That's how it should be, Danielle. Respect isn't requested. It's required." The words settled in the air like a quiet benediction. Danielle nodded, her expression steady, before continuing down the aisle. Olivia leaned back in her seat, letting the hum of the engines wash over her. This was the peak of the curve, the highest point on the emotional arc. Not the drama of confrontation or the tension of investigation, but the deep satisfaction of seeing systemic change take root. As the flight neared cruising altitude, Olivia glanced around the cabin. A black woman in first class was reading a book without side glances from other passengers. A young South Asian couple chatted quietly with a flight attendant. A man in a business suit helped an elderly passenger stow a bag without fuss. It was ordinary. And that, Olivia thought, was extraordinary. When they landed in Atlanta, Olivia stepped off the plane into the warm southern air. The terminal here was the same one where, a year earlier, she had been at the center of a media storm. Now, there were no reporters, no chaos, just the hum of an industry that had adapted, grown, and carried forward the lesson learned at Gate C-17. As she walked through the terminal, she passed another Carter Protocol poster. This one bore a quote she recognized from her own press conference months earlier. "Respect isn't requested, it's required." She smiled faintly, feeling the arc close in her mind. 1 year ago, those words had been a demand. Now, they were the standard.